I get the feeling this is going to be a theme of the podcast, but can you say the name of that game again?
Which game? Zelda?
The one you literally were just talking about.
Uh,
Title of
Ocarina of
it.
Time? Zelda Ocarina of Time? Well,
Ocarina.
Ocarina. Yeah, so Ocarina.
Yeah. That's literally the word.
Game begin.
I love the Mystery Gaming Bros! The Mystery Gaming Bros know how to party!
Hey, Mystery Pony Fiction here, bringing you a new podcast called Mystery Gaming Bronies with my co-host Shakespearicles, the world's strongest writer. And hopefully another co-host will join us next time. This is a gaming discussion podcast from a brony perspective. So, Shakes, what's been happening with you?
Well, as the world's strongest writer, I've been writing as per usual.
What a shock.
Yeah. Also, when my muse escapes me, I do game also. I recently just finished 100%ing Cult of the Lamb, so that's
well
fresh on
done.
my mind.
Yeah, I played a bit of that, but I kind of like last time I played it before the update, I kind of got bored at the point where there stopped being new stuff to unlock. Like I pretty much filled out the tree, and I still had like 2 or 3 whole levels left, and that kind of turned me off a bit. That there was no more progression once you reach a
Well,
certain
the,
point.
the purpose of the progression is to help you be able to do the combat levels.
Yeah.
So if you so I'm not trying to be a dick about this, but if you literally unlock all the tech and you still can't beat the levels, then that's a skill issue.
Yeah,
Um,
I don't think it was that.
and
I just I beat most of the bosses the first time I fought them, you know. So I don't think it was that. It just seemed to unlock too fast. Um, and I did try to play the game a second time when the update came out, and I didn't get as far as the first time. So that's kind of
Now, which
how it went
update
for
are you
me.
talking about? Because there's been a few. It's been a very active development team.
Well, it was the fairly recent one.
The old relics update.
Yeah. Let me look
Okay,
at my Steam library.
the old gods, because they did a Halloween update back in October, which was pretty substantial in terms of content. The thing with the old relics update is that it focuses largely on post-game content because the vast majority of the people who are playing it have beaten the main story game.
Yeah.
So this adds basically a reason to go back and replay the whole game. And it doesn't mean you have to start a new game. It means you can take a game that you have completed and you're in the post-game part of it. And this says, hey, go ahead and do all of this post-game content without having to start a whole new run.
Yeah.
I started a whole new run, but I found that I largely did not need to, and ended up doing a lot of work over again, really for no reason. But honestly, I enjoy that game so much where they could just say, "Oh, by the way, we fixed a spelling error in one of the dialogues," and that's a reason enough for me to start a whole new playthrough because I really enjoyed that game.
Yeah. One thing I did find though was that I got it on Switch, which was probably a mistake because yeah, there were pretty bad like frame rate dips and like it would like full on stop at times, just stop
Yeah,
to catch
when
up with the
you're
action.
playing an isometric roguelite with combat with melee combat, you really cannot have frame dropping like that.
Yeah.
We're not talking about a turn-based game like Final Fantasy where you can like be running at like 15 frames a second and still make a competent choice and have the game, make it have the game result the way you want it to. When you
Yeah.
have real-time combat, it needs to be smooth, and I am very keen on flying the PC Master Race flag. But this is one of those games that really just was not optimized for the Switch, and that I don't recommend it on that
Yeah.
platform.
I often get quite burned by the Switch. Like, I keep thinking, oh, this will be a good game to play in bed and stuff. And but then I realized that it couldn't even handle those graphics. Like, even though they're fairly simplistic looking graphics, they're still a bit too much for the Switch.
Yeah. and in my experience, I find that the best game to play in bed is Hide the Sausage.
Yeah.
I have a very good PC gaming rig, and I realize that money is a big barrier for a lot of people. And not everyone has like expendable income to buy a good like $2,000 gaming PC. And I feel like I'm actually kind of middling the range on that too, because it can go a lot higher from there. But if you go much lower than $2,000 on a gaming PC, this is American currency. I know the exchange rate's pretty shit some places. But for 2,000 American dollars, that's the middle of the range. If you go much below that, you're going to end up being behind the curve. And when you're building or even buying a pre-built, I don't know what the stigma is against buying a pre-built PC is. I don't understand it, honestly. This is coming from someone who built PCs for years. If you're going to spend a bunch of money on a gaming PC, you really need that thing to be, I don't want to say future-proof, but future-resistant, where it's going to be a competent, competitive gaming PC for at least the next 4 years.
Yeah. I've rented this PC. It was like $140 a month, but I managed to get it discounted to $70 a month because it was pre-used, but probably for only 3 months or so it was pre-used. But that allowed the price of it to be down a lot more. So I pay $70 a month for this, and it wasn't as good as I hoped it would be. Like I thought I'd be able to, load up Cyberpunk 2077 and play that at 60 frames, but no, I can only really get 30 frames at 1080p. But then even then, like I kept on playing around with the benchmark, and what ended up happening is the game crashed, and then I couldn't open it anymore. It just refused to open.
Yeah, renting a PC is just a really alien concept to me. I mean, I get that like these sort of rent-a-center places exist, and you can rent just about anything. But for me, a PC is an incredibly personal, intimate thing that I own.
I certainly hope I
where-
never have to return this PC. Like I'd obviously have to wipe it first and all that sort of stuff.
Well, oh, you mean like digitally wipe it?
Yeah, like factory restore. Like I actually did that with my last PC that I also rented for like $49 a month, and I actually wiped that and sent it to my mum after I finished with it. So
Yeah, I hope it's one of those rent-to-own situations, but that's a conversation for another time.
yeah, so I'll own this PC if I keep it for 3 years. Same with the last one I did.
I'm sorry, you should keep for 3 years.
Yeah,
Like if you rent it for 3 years, you'll own it.
yeah, that's right.
Right. But how much you say you're renting it for a month?
$70.
70. Okay. So 7 times 12 is 70 plus another 14. So it's 84, $840 times 3. That's more than $2,000, my friend.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's the only way I can really afford to keep up with a relatively decent PC.
That is not true. Honestly, you'd be better off taking out a small loan from a bank and paying much less on interest than you would be paying to rent a PC. You get the loan, you buy the PC, you pay the loan back. Not only do you own that PC now, but you also get to improve your credit by paying back a loan to a bank institution rather than renting to a rent-a-center, which does not improve your credit.
Yeah,
And also
I've never considered my credit. Like I've pretty much always been at like no debt. So
that's good.
like, I'm
which
not
means
sure
you
how
should-
different that is in Australia.
That's lending money is a universal capitalist thing. You can, I mean, even, and I'm not trying to get political here, but even like Russia and China has banks where you get loans to build things. That's just like they pretend that they have a certain system, but honestly, that the basic exchange of goods for services and currency is all rooted in a very fundamental system that you're just not going to get away from, no matter what political umbrella you roll under. Anyways, I'm just saying there's smarter ways to have a nice PC.
Yeah, I suppose so. But
Just looking out for you,
one
bud.
thing I've never wanted to do is to get into a habit of borrowing. I prefer to keep that slate clean and not go there, especially since I can do really stupid things when I get my hands on a lot of money. So, I just, I've always, avoided that. And one time I did borrow money in an emergency, and now I am flooded constantly in text messages and emails from loan companies. Now that they have my information and they've shared it with each other, I'm now constantly advertised to, from loan companies.
Right.
So,
Well,
yeah.
again, that's why you don't go to a loan place like a payday loan place. You go to an actual bank and apply for a proper
Oh,
bank
yeah.
loan rather than a loan shark.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure there's better things I could be doing, but I'm just glad that I've rarely ever had to be in the position to borrow money. Just kept the slate clean and out of debt.
Yeah.
Other than a really bad course I took, like those call centers, like there's school call centers, and I had one of them call me and talk me into doing a management course, like a lot of years ago. So now I've got about a
Yep.
$3,000 debt to them.
All right.
Yeah. Sorry, you're getting a bit of background noise occasionally.
That's
Not
all
when
right.
you're talking though, which is
Well, I have my ice machine running behind me,
oh yeah.
uh, but I can turn that off for when we record these in the future.
Yeah, it's actually the background noise is coming in sometimes when you're not speaking, like when I'm
Yeah.
speaking and you're quiet, it's coming through, which
All right.
is weird.
That is weird.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I noticed you've been playing Peglin as well on your Steam profile.
Wow. Okay, that was the last time I played. That was back in March. But yeah, we can definitely talk about that.
Yeah, yeah, I've been playing it quite a lot. It's pretty addictive. Like I thought, oh yeah, I'll give this a little try, and then I ended up playing it for like an hour every day before work, just about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's up to update 8 now, so I think it's nearly at its finished version. I
Yeah,
don't
I'm,
know
I'm
what.
looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to being able to play more than just the 3 areas that they started out with.
Oh yeah, it's still 3 areas. Um, didn't know if
Right.
they were planning to do more.
They better. Like, I'm really hoping for like an endless mode, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Um, and also, like it seems to like you seem to either not get very far and get your ass kicked, or you just like pile on the amount of power to the point that you're just about invincible.
Yeah.
That I
It's
found.
it's it's one of those roguelikes where it's not a roguelite. I mean, I guess I suppose it is. There are some progressive elements to it, but it really is a roguelike where you start out with, it really depends on those early moments with what upgrades you get, what's going to determine your strategy going forward. Because like based on what my first like 2 or 3 upgrades are, I'm going to say like, okay, I'm going to lean toward bombs, or I'm going to go toward the ball multipliers, or whatever, and then you kind of focus on that particular avenue. And if you just get a bunch of upgrades that just don't synergize together, then yeah, then you're gonna have you get a couple of bad bounces, and you end up going down the wrong path, and you get stopped, and that's just how it goes. That's the nature of randomness. Um, I ended up getting it based on a strange recommendation, and it was on a deep sale. Because I remember playing like Peggle way back in the day. Um, and found that it was like like they kept making a lot of emphasis on skill, but really it was just about on chance, because unless you have a degree from smart attitude, then you're not going to be able to predict where the ball's going to go to the first 2 ricochets, and just largely comes
Yeah,
down to chance,
yeah.
which I think suits a roguelike like this, you know.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing about this is that your choices do matter quite a lot. It's not quite so random, and you do have certain, like, you want to try to aim to hit the money pegs, and, you know, uh, like strategically try to get more money so that you can upgrade things.
Yeah.
And
And I think the only frustrating part is when you go to select your path, and if it's not an obvious straight shot to go left or right, then you can run into some trouble where you end up going in the wrong direction. And I find that more than any other aspect of the game is what will end up screwing me over. But
yeah.
it's part of the design. And I accept that.
Yeah, I had to put the hold to aim mode on because sometimes when I'd select an enemy, try to select an enemy, it would shoot the ball. And I found that it was pretty much essential to have the hold to aim because, yeah, otherwise when you try to select enemies, it would shoot. I don't know if you noticed that.
Yeah, no, I understand. I think it's meant more for like people who are like using a tablet or a touchscreen, but definitely that too.
Yeah. But also, like one thing that does sort of turn me off a bit about is that there's a lack of that sort of incremental growth and like things that you unlock. Like I haven't even unlocked a class. Well, sorry, I've unlocked one class, and it's showing me how to unlock a second class. But other than those classes, there doesn't seem to be much that actually unlocks progressively as you go, except for maybe being able to use it in custom runs.
Right. Like I've unlocked a few of the like progressive difficulty runs, which I
Oh
suppose is
yeah,
their
yeah,
idea
yeah. The
of,
Crucible.
of yeah, the endless mode there where you it gets progressively more difficult to get to a point where you can't go any further, which in a way is the same as creating more levels, but in like a really kind of lazy sort of way where it's just like, hey, it's progressive difficulty, it's a ladder, you know,
Yeah,
but that's not really creating more content. That's just fiddling with a few numbers in the
yeah,
background, which I feel like is the lazy way to go out. And you said they're on update uh, point 0.8, which on the way to 1.0, since it is in early access. I would hope that 1.0 would come with more actual content.
yeah,
I mean, I'm happy with the game as it is, and I don't mind it for the price that I paid because I did get it on sale, so I'm not going to complain about that. But for the price that they're asking, I would hope that when 1.0 comes out, that it does come with more content.
yeah. Like like compared to something like Binding of Isaac or what I just played recently, Brotato. Um, like after every run, just about you're like unlocking new stuff to play with, and it like doesn't have the whole library of weapons and stuff available to you at first. You like unlock new stuff. Like I don't know if you've played Binding of Isaac or one of those other sort of roguelikes.
I've played Hades,
Oh yeah, Hades. Yeah, that's another good one.
and
Um,
the thing with that mechanic is that again, you still start out each run with essentially nothing. Whatever you started out the first time you play it, you're gonna start out with the next time you play it. And
yeah,
when you're unlocking progressive elements, excuse me, you're unlocking the ability to find them in the run of the game.
yeah, yeah,
So like you get to a certain point, you unlock a new two-handed sword, and so now at some point in those intervening levels, you could then find that two-handed sword, which will do more damage or gives you a bigger reach, and then it lets you get a little bit further, which unlocks this other thing. But you still need to get there in order to get those things. You don't just start out with this automatic buff to your health or your damage. I mean, some games do function like that. Um, and like Noita comes to mind, where you can discover spells and artifacts that you can then find on subsequent runs more readily with the seed generation based on what you've unlocked. Uh, but again, you still start out with essentially just your basics, your basic wand, your basic potion, and you have to still find those things in the map.
yeah. Like I think one of my favorite ones that I've seen is Dead Cells. With how you unlock new weapons that you can find in the run and stuff.
Yeah, I got Dead Cells. I tried it back in March. I forgot what compelled me to get it. I think I saw someone else's review about it, and I tried it out, and I I got a decent ways through it. I don't really I can't really quantify my progress through because I don't
Well,
know like
I've got
how.
one boss cell. but I haven't gotten any further than that. But apparently, some people got like 10.
Yeah, so I've gotten to like the third area.
Oh, okay, just the area.
Yeah, so well, I don't know if I faced off with any bosses necessarily, but I mean I found the moment to moment gameplay to be rather underwhelming,
Okay.
which yeah, and
I
when
mean,
it comes down to it, when you're playing a roguelike, you have to take those take the actual moment to moment combat and be like, am I enjoying this? Because if I'm going to be grinding for hours, I don't want it to necessarily feel like a grind. I need to enjoy the grind. And if you're not enjoying the grind, then don't play it. You know, like Cult of the Lamb, like you're going from room to room, you're fighting a handful of enemies. They need to be varied enough. The combat needs to be varied enough. The weapons and your abilities need to be varied enough where it always feels a little, at least a little bit fresh. So that way, when you're going through and playing it for the 12th playthrough, you know, is you can still enjoy the grind, even
yeah,
if it is a
I
grind.
think that's one thing that Dead Cells does do. Like, if you've only like gotten to the third area, but basically you're constantly unlocking weapons that get randomized in your next run, and like what happens when I get one boss cell is that I start only getting my health regenerated every second stage, and apparently it gets harder and harder as you reach more boss cells. And what that is where you basically finish the game, and then you can choose to play your next game with that one boss cell, and it makes everything harder, makes all the enemies harder, makes you get healed less, and yeah, for a while now, I've just been playing on one boss cell, but I haven't been able to beat the game again to get two boss cells. And apparently, when you get two boss cells, it makes everything harder again. But
See,
so
you
far,
can
I've like unlocked nearly every weapon. But they have added more weapons since they've been bringing updates out often. But like, I'm starting to get to the point where I actually um, start having to spend my points on things other than new weapons and armor.
see the Cult of the Lamb has a similar mechanic like that called a difficulty setting, and so you can turn up the difficulty, and the playthrough gets harder.
Yeah, yeah. I
Um,
I, I just know that I have played Dead Cells for probably like 200 hours, and yeah, have gotten really into it, and yeah, it's taken like that long to start, having everything unlocked. Like, yeah, there's some weapons that you just find along the way, but there's some that are more challenging where you have to actually capture enemies in order to unlock the skill that they have and add it to the pool of randomized stuff that you can get. So I don't know. I think you should probably yeah, play more Dead Cells and see what its real potential is, because I personally have found it more fun than Cult of the Lamb. But
well, I could go back and give it another look.
it also depends
I'm
on whether
just
you like the side scrolling or the top shooting, sort of thing as well.
well, there was oh gosh, there was another game I was looking at where you are going through the hull of a dead uh, ghost ship, and it's zero gravity, so you're floating around in the room, but you're also fighting these other creatures and ships that are inside this large wreck, and it seems like a 2D side scroller where there's no gravity, so you're just hovering in midair. But really, it's more like Hotline Miami, where it's a top-down Grand Theft Auto 2 view, and you're just standing in the middle of a room because functionally it's the same.
Yeah.
Um, and so like it's funny because I wanted to remark when you said that you'd put over 200 hours into Dead Cells. Like I'm glad that you enjoy the game that much. I could not see myself putting that much time into a game like that, a single player game like that. I mean, like the closest I could compare to would be like Skyrim, but I can't imagine any other game like
Yeah.
being like that for me anymore. Not to say that no game now could be like Skyrim. I'm sure it could be. Like the new Jedi Survivor game could be
And
that for
Zelda.
me.
I'm sure you've been hearing a lot about Zelda as well.
Yeah, same with that. Now, and that's on the Switch, which I suppose I could look up my gaming metrics on there. It's just not it's available right now. I have not played the new Zelda game. I don't have a problem with spoilers if you want to talk about it. Um,
Uh,
what was I going to say? Oh, so the games that I do have the most hours on is actually the Left 4 Dead games, Left 4 Dead 1 and 2.
yeah.
Not necessarily because they were such great games. I mean, they are, and they were at the time, certainly.
Because of the
Uh,
multiplayer.
but because of the way that it is a multiplayer game, and everybody, when those games came out, each time those games came out, everybody was playing those games because those were just such great co-op games. And even when the gameplay would have become stale for me, I was still enjoying it because I was playing it with friends, and it more or less became an interactive chat room, which is a big reason why World of Warcraft has gone for as long as it has. Because there have been other games that have, been touted as WoW killers, like Knights of the Old Republic, or no, what was it called? No, the Old Republic, which was the Star Wars MMO, which was by every objective measure better than World
Yeah.
of Warcraft in terms of its mechanics and
Yeah,
whatnot. And if
I'll tell you now, I've got about 2,000 hours in Final Fantasy 14. Yeah, that's gobbled up quite a lot of my life.
And
So,
here's the thing, but like none of them are going to be WoW killers because WoW is an interactive chat room. And so if you want to have everyone from World of Warcraft come over to your game, you got to get this one player to come over. Well, he's got to bring all of their friends because that's how he interacts with his friends. He's got to bring all of his friends, and they have to bring all of their friends, and they got to bring all of their friends, etc., etc. And that's just not going to happen.
yeah, I
The,
suppose. I mean, 14's getting pretty popular, but I probably also put about 3,000 hours into WoW back in the Wrath of the Lich King Cataclysm days. Like, I used to be really into it back then. And man, that seems like such a long time ago now when Cataclysm was the latest WoW expansion. That was like
yeah,
2011.
yeah, and I remember that. And they had the whole like, hey, play for free up to level 20, just to try it out. And my girlfriend at the time, she invited me to play that with her, and I did. And so she took me along on raids where she was essentially carrying me, where she's just like, hang back, don't deal with any of the combat. You're going to get a shitload of XP, and you'll power level quickly,
Yeah.
which I did. And it was so weird being the person on the outside because they were all raiding and talking in a language that I didn't understand at the time. I mean, I understand it now, like all the DPS and dots and crap like that language now in
Oh yeah,
terms of
yeah.
like
That definitely took a lot to learn, and like the term
damage over
huntard.
time, yeah, all that stuff, and so,
Yeah,
and
it
so
kind of
like
feels like you've learned a new language, that
yeah,
ordinary people
like
can't understand.
I had showed up to a party with all these strangers, and I was just kind of holding onto this person's sleeve as they, were kind of dragging me around to do all this stuff that I didn't understand. And but like it seemed just so natural the way that they communicated with each other, and partially there was a social aspect too, like oh blah blah blah, hey so and so how you doing? How's the kids? Oh good blah blah blah. How's the wife? Oh you having another baby?
Yeah,
And it was like a chat room while they were doing all this really spectacular, flashy stuff on screen. And then, of course, then there was the loot drops and everyone gets whatever. Like, oh, no, no rares. Oh, gotta do it again. And I'm like, what do you mean you gotta do it again? Oh yeah, you gotta run this. You gotta run this dungeon so many times. It's a 1 in 2,000 drop. So gotta do it again. And I'm like,
yeah. I
throw up
certainly remember the
2,000
times that I've run through dungeons like hundreds of times.
Yeah,
Um,
and that's just it. And like, and that's why I was talking about. Like, yeah, you just run the same dungeon hundreds of times. Like, yeah, but like we chat while we do it. We all know what we're doing. It's just because we've done it so many times. So you just hang out and you're chatting. Like, so it's an interactive chat room.
yeah,
And that was
another
what
one that I
was
spend a lot of time in is Elder Scrolls Online. I like how that has more of the single player classic Elder Scrolls gameplay. Um, And also, I like how you can play any part of the game. Like you can play, yeah, you can play any part of the game at level 1, Like you can get the latest expansion and play that content with a new, fresh character. And like I don't know, I haven't done very much sort of multiplayer gaming. Like I'm trying to get more into it, but I haven't really had the friend circle to, that's like on at the same time as me. And like I see you a lot of the time playing like Terraria and stuff with people in Valheim, and the problem is it's hard to like dedicate myself to like a particular time that other people are playing in a persistent world that's going to keep going. When they've all left or when I have to leave. That's why I tend to prefer the Jackbox quick 30-minute game sort of things.
Yeah, and like I get that. Like I know with Scarlet running a persistent server, you could go on and play Terraria, but usually you're playing all by yourself while the rest of up over is sleeping.
Yeah, and like when I go in there, it's like everything's already been done. There's already like every kind of item in the chest that I can just take and use, and it doesn't really feel like there's any progression happening that I can really feel like I'm responsible for. But yeah, I don't know.
And
I just don't really get the
tough.
appeal yet of
Yeah,
jumping into
and like
something like that.
that's why whenever I know like Valheim just had the big Mistlands update a little while ago, and we were talking about like, hey, let's get that server going again, and go see the new content. But if you run into the same problem with people who are now newly interested in the game, they want to start playing, and it's like, okay, well, what should we do? Should we bring them into this persistent world where they can just grab all this stuff that's like like 5 levels above where they would be starting? Because as a returning player, the early game is frustrating, but as a new player, the early game is very important because it has a lot of tutorial aspects to it, and you don't want to take that away from them. Now, I was very fortunate the very first time I played Valheim, I had a player who was experienced, but they started a new game with me, and they kind of like walked me through like, hey, here's how you build it. Because like the problem is like if you take a new player, you just hand them all this stuff. When they go to play a new game on their own, they're like, hey, how do I build a house? They don't know because they never had to do it. So like the first time I played it, they were like, hey, here's how you build a house. Open up this menu. And it's like, well, what are you playing on? Are you playing PC? Okay, so it should probably be F, So they kind of walk you through like how to do it, and you go through the paces yourself. And that's a good teacher, is someone who shows you how to do something rather than doing it for yourself. They're teaching you how to fish rather than just giving you one.
Yeah, it can feel pretty satisfying to be able to like be the expert and show someone through a game. Yeah, I really I would like to kind of experience that more, but for me it's just like 30-minute games like Town of Salem or something where the whole game is done in 30 minutes. And I also find that I'm preferring, those shorter games more, probably because I'm, working now. Because, like, something like Potato or, those roguelike shooters, where you, like, level through the whole course of a game in 30 minutes, or like Vampire Survivors, as opposed to something like Diablo or what was it called, Last Epoch, where it takes you like 50 hours of game time to get a character from level 1 to the max level.
Yeah.
I think I find it more satisfying, that faster pace of power creep.
Yeah, well, I did this. There's this whole stigma about like casual gaming, and unfortunately, that's kind of where we as working adults kind of get pigeonholed, is that we kind of have to do casual gaming because we don't have time. We don't have the blocks of time to dedicate to these larger games. Like I went back to Valheim. I went back to a particular save file that I had when the big Mistlands update came out, and I hadn't played the game in months.
It can be really hard to like go back to an old save that's like 2 years old and try to remember what you were doing or what your goals were.
And worse than that, it's when like you have to relearn the control scheme because
Oh yeah.
you could play two different isometric roguelikes where it's a melee based game like Cult of the Lamb versus Hades, for example, and the light attack versus heavy attack buttons could be opposite,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
you're trying to dodge roll, and then instead you're doing your special attack instead, and it's like, wait, no, that's and the fact that they don't
Especially
have
especially with like the Switch compared to the Xbox, like the all the buttons are literally switched around to the opposite, and sometimes they actually change the game to make it the same, but other times the buttons literally are switched. You
yeah,
know.
I'm very happy that the Microsoft Xbox controller has a USB connection which integrates seamlessly with a Microsoft Windows PC because the Xbox is my preferred controller because I have human hands and I'm not a robot, which is obviously what the Switch controller was designed for. I don't understand why Nintendo just does not know how to make a controller for humans.
Well, I like the Switch controller. It's just that I think the reason why the buttons are switched around is like a copyright issue. Like, literally Nintendo can't have their buttons in the same places and named the same thing as the
Here's
Xbox
the
one.
thing. Here's the thing. I think, well, you might be right, but it's backwards. You have to understand, like in the console war game between Nintendo, Sony, and Xbox, Nintendo doesn't even see Sony and Xbox as competition. It's it's so far above and beyond. And I'm not saying that Nintendo is so great. I'm not trying to like
Oh,
metaphorically
they're
fillet
bad in a
Nintendo
lot
here,
of ways.
but yeah, but like they don't have competition. They can just make whatever they want and people will buy it. That's just it's the video game equivalent of Apple products. That they have a fan base that they could just literally they could make Breath of the Wild 2 and literally just have it be Breath of the Wild with like a new coat of paint and people will spend $60 a copy on that game
Yeah,
because
it
that's
kind of actually, it kind of is like that. Like they've just, yeah, they've taken the same world and they've just added a sky dimension and depth dimension. But yeah, they have changed a lot about the world. But yeah, one of the big criticisms is that it could have just been a DLC, but
yeah.
like a
And
really big
and
DLC.
here's the thing, like Breath of the Wild was the game that compelled me to buy the Switch because um, I played it for oh God, I don't know, less than an hour. Definitely not more than an hour. I went over to my girlfriend's house. She had it, and she's like, "Here, start a new game." So because I created my own profile on her Switch, and I started my own game of Breath of the Wild, and I in that first hour, and it's laughable now because I'm like practically a speedrunner when it comes to the beginning plateau there, but I never made it off the beginning plateau area. I thought that plateau was literally the whole game, and I
Oh,
was so no for real.
yeah, yeah.
But
Oh,
I was so in love with that game. I was like, oh, dude, I have to get this. And she's like, you didn't even get out of the tutorial area. I'm like, I don't care. This is the
yeah.
best.
I had the
And
same experience with Ocarina of Time. Like I literally thought that the Deku tree and the boss at the end of the Deku tree was the end of the game. And
yeah,
yeah, I was pretty surprised to find out, oh, there's these, two other dungeons to go to. And then I was even more
all right.
surprised when there was like, oh, another 7 dungeons to go to. Yeah,
Now
I get that feeling.
I get the feeling this is going to be a theme of the podcast, but can you say the name of that game again?
Which game? Zelda?
The one you literally were just talking about.
Uh,
Title of
Ocarina of
it.
Time? Zelda Ocarina of Time? Well,
Ocarina.
Ocarina. Yeah, so Ocarina.
Yeah. That's literally the word.
Okay. Yeah, I guess we just say some things differently in Australia compared to
Well, that's
Americans.
the yeah. Yanks.
Yikes.
Bloody Yanks.
Well, you know how it is here. We all grew up from convicts, so we speak like convicts. Like we're, can barely know English.
So, all right. Where was I going with that? Oh, but yeah, but that was the game that compelled me to buy the Switch, and after that, I ended up getting a lot of things that uh what was the next game I got on the Switch after that was it was actually Let's Go Eevee,
Ah,
which
yeah. I never played those. I'm bored of like the first generation of Pokemon at this point. I played the remakes, and now there's another remake with different catching mechanics. I wasn't
yeah,
really interested in that one.
and essentially that's what it is. And but the thing with it too was that like I don't I'm not going to presume how old you are, but like I was old enough for when Red and Blue first came out, and subsequently Yellow, and I remember, and I did a whole blog post about this that I'm sure you've probably read, but I remember like what a pain in the butt it was to try to grind to level up your individual Pokemon to get your team ready for the next uh, gym and all
Oh
that stuff
yeah,
because
like I remember being in that, the tunnel, the Victory Road tunnels, often having to
yeah.
spend days in there getting a high enough level to be able to beat the Elite Four.
Yeah, and the whole thing with that was the idea of that obviously was to pad the gameplay because like
Mm.
you spent all this money on this game, which honestly there wasn't a whole lot to the game. Like honestly, there really is not a whole lot to the old Pokemon games because it's just you're going on in these rooms on these and you're going to these two-dimensional map areas where you walk through this grass and in the background a bunch of dice are being rolled and whether or not you're going to encounter a Pokemon and then what Pokemon you're going to encounter based on what area you're in and then those stats. And it's just a whole bunch of RNG. It's a an RPG in the most purest sense, I would say.
Yeah, but plus
And
back in those days you didn't have like guides and stuff. Like, or at least it wasn't as easy to just
well,
look things up online.
that's the other thing too. Like if you wanted to know what the heck you were doing, you had to subscribe to Nintendo Power Magazine, which
Yeah.
you had to pay for because this was all before the internet.
It also
Now,
reminds me of Final Fantasy VII, like a lot of like rumors that were completely untrue for Ocarina of Time as well. Like all these rumors you'd hear that were completely untrue. Yeah, and you
such
try to do
as
ridiculous things in game, like
like little joke advice, like hey, jump off this cliff
yeah,
and you'll find a secret item.
or there's like a vehicle in Pokemon, like there's a truck that you're apparently supposed to be able to push and make some secret Pokemon appear. But yeah, people tried it and it never worked for anyone, and yeah, it turned out to be false. But people had to spend ages trying to do it.
Anyways, the point I was trying to make was that I remember sinking literally hundreds of hours into that game because that was the only game I could have afforded that summer with the allowance money that I had, which
Oh
was
yeah,
great because like that was the only game I was going to have. I was going to play the ever living crap out of it. But now I'm a grown ass adult and I've got plenty of money, but what I don't have is time.
oh
And
yeah,
the thing that I like about a game like Let's Go Eevee or Let's Go Pikachu is that it is a remake of Pokemon Yellow. It is the same original 151 Pokemon, and it's literally the exact same story. You've got Team Rocket, you've got the original region, and you've got all these same Pokemon in the same areas, and all it is just a graphical upgrade. However, the catching mechanic is different. The fact that you can see the Pokemon in the overworld is different, so you don't have to go wondering what you're going to catch. You can see the Pokemon you want to catch, walk over to it, and then catch it.
yeah.
At least
That's
you know
become a
what
bit of a
type you're.
mainstay of the series now. Being able
Yeah,
to,
and that's
yeah,
it. And that's the thing too. The whole "Let's Go" Pokemon, Let's Go Eevee, Let's Go Pikachu. That kind of kicked all this off because people were like, "Look, we're tired of it being random because we're all freaking busy." Especially, I mean, all right, so you've got Gen X, I'm Gen X, we're all, working adults. We don't have time to spend 300 hours grinding to find a particular rare Pokemon. We've got jobs to do, and we're not going to buy this game if we're going to have to waste a bunch of time doing it. We're just not going to buy it because we can read the reviews online. We're savvy customers now, and so I liked it because I could pick it up, play it, and I got through the main story fairly quickly. And the same thing with like Let's Go Arceus, where you got through the main. I don't want to say you get through the main story fairly quickly. You didn't. The main story for that game.
Yeah, I didn't play it, but yeah, I saw a lot of stuff online about how bad it looked. Like it was, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I could just read you my review, but like, but I don't really want to do that right now. The point is, like, I understand the reason why it had poor graphics, but I also don't forgive it. Because it is Nintendo, and Nintendo essentially has an infinite budget.
They've done Breath of the Wild before, so
yeah, exactly.
Not an excuse.
And my point is like the fact that you can catch Pokemon that you want to catch more easily. The fact that they have the automatic experience sharing means you can level up your whole team at the same time much faster. It's just more streamlined. It's easier. And look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's watered down. It is simpler in every regard, and yeah, it is easier. And because it's made for a different audience, because it's made for Gen Xers who have less time, and it's made for Gen Z, which has less attention span, where they want to play through the whole game, as quickly as possible and move on to the next hot thing. And that's really, if my advice to any video game maker now is that you have to understand your audience. Right now, your audience has an attention span of about 7 seconds. You have just 7 seconds to get their attention, or else they're going to move on to the next thing.
Largely thanks to TikTok.
Well, I wouldn't say it's thanks to TikTok. First of all, TikTok is just a straight-up ripoff of Vine. Yeah. You remember Vine, okay? And the whole idea was Vine.
Vine was a brief little experiment.
Brief? No. Vine lasted well over a year, but the idea of Vine was that it specifically restricted your videos to being only 7 seconds long because of the whole psychological premise that like how the current generation's attention span is only 7 seconds long. And Vine was like, all right, fine, your video can only be 7 seconds long. And TikTok said, okay, great. Hey, here's our platform. It's the same thing, but you can make your video longer.
Yeah, 3 minutes, and now they're up to 10 minutes, and now 30 minutes. They've gone up to 30 minutes recently. So they're literally trying to replace YouTube, and YouTube really needs to stop doing its whole censorship crap, or TikTok is going to overtake it. But
YouTube needs competition for exactly that reason. But you're never gonna stop the power cycle where a particular platform comes into power and abuses that power to its own ends. Like look at cable TV.
And Skype too. Skype, went way off the deep end when it started monetizing and having ads that would literally cause the program to crash.
All right, listen. I realize I'm talking to somebody a lot younger than me, but when cable TV came to power, like it was trying to overtake network TV, because network TV, it broadcasted from towers. Anyone who had a box, a television box with antennas could pick up the signal for free. And all they needed to do is pay for the electricity to turn on the TV. And they got the signal for free. And the only way you could pay for that signal was with commercials. And the commercials funded the broadcast of this free signal that every home could receive with their antenna television. And cable comes along and says, hey, here is a direct connection, so you don't have to worry about the signal. Okay, here's a direct connection to your TV, and you can watch all the TV you want if you pay for our service commercial free. And everyone's like, yeah, I hate commercials. I will pay money for the service to have commercial-free television. And that's how cable television started out. And then cable's like, hey, all of this income from all these people paying for the service is great, but hey, we could also have commercials and make more money. And of course, every company's like, we want to make more money. So then cable television had commercials any fucking way because that's just what happened. And then cable television's like, well, what else are you gonna do? Go back to network television? They look at like 7 channels now, and 3 of them are in Spanish. So people are like, well, I guess it's a crooked game, but it's the only one in town. Well, along comes Netflix, and they're like, hey, if you want to watch whatever show you want to watch, and this is a big fucking leap because like you have to understand, cable television was around for a long damn time, at least in terms of my lifetime. They Netflix comes along, and originally they were just like mailing you DVDs to watch at home just for movies. But then they started saying like, hey, what if we had the streaming service where since everyone's pretty much got streaming internet now because cable internet was the thing at the time, they said, hey, you want to watch like these shows? We can just have these old episodes of these shows all here where you can watch commercial free. All you gotta do is just not only pay for your cable connection for your internet, which everyone was already doing, but if you pay for the service, you can watch these shows commercial free. And everyone's like, yeah, hell yeah, I love that. So they started doing that. And then and as soon as you have success, you emulate that with competitors. Then you have Hulu, you've got Disney Plus, you've got Amazon TV, and all these other streaming services where they're like, we want a piece of that pie.
Yeah.
And so
have you watched the streaming wars on the streaming wars episodes of South Park?
No, I have not seen South Park in a long time, but really? I do like the show.
Well, yeah, the streaming wars goes over all that. A lot of that commentary about a lot of that stuff.
Yeah. So then you got like the situation with like Hulu, for example, where not only you're paying for the internet connection with your cable, and you're paying for the streaming service on top of that to watch Hulu, but you're still getting commercials because they will always take more money when they can from wherever. And that like
called
and the same thing applies to and the same thing comes back to but here's the thing. With the cycle of power, there's always going to be the next person that comes along and says, hey, are you tired of watching commercials on that platform? Come do this platform where there's no commercials or whatever. And
then,
so
if they manage to get the audience, they'll end up doing commercials themselves anyway.
Exactly. And so as the audience moves along, they do commercials, and then this is why piracy, while illegal, is still popular. Considered. Piracy is just
you would
in
totally
general.
download a car.
I'm talking about in the historical, like just the idea, the concept of piracy. Piracy is an important economic force because, like, when you look at like what happened with Game of Thrones became as popular as it did because of piracy. Because not very many people had HBO. And so the show got pirated a lot, but the pirated versions of that show were not very good. But the show was so good that the piracy basically acted like free advertising, and it got a lot of people to subscribe to HBO Max. And so now everybody's watching HBO Max for Game of Thrones as a result of piracy, which kind of that's the exception to the rule. But the point is if you have a monopoly on a particular commodity, whether it's a show or diamonds or whatever commodity you have, and if you start charging more money than people are willing to spend on it, but it's something that people still want, then you are going to end up having to deal with piracy. You're going to have people who are going to acquire it through illegal means, and it could be anything, and then they're going to sell it cheaper, to meet that demand. And that's something that has been happening for as long as capitalism has existed. All the way back to trading berries for cows, in Stone Age days. And that's the reason why you've got things like you've got Steam for a gaming platform, and you have other platforms like you've got Epic Games, for example, as a different platform, and there's a few others. But right now, Steam is the big one. But like, it needs to have those competitors. It's the reason why you see so many like free games being offered up on Epic Games, because like that's all they can do to try to entice people to come over from Steam.
Yeah, I don't see how that's going to be sustainable. like how they're actually going to come out ahead at the end of that. It's sort of like what Uber does with how it like operates at a loss, but has like integrated itself into society on such a fundamental level that like now they're too big to fail.
Uber?
Yeah, you know, Uber Eats, you know, started the whole gig economy.
Right. I'm not, but like for them to be operating at a loss is news to me.
Oh, well, that's what they claim, but I'm sure they probably could be paying their workers a minimum wage, but they don't.
Yeah, right. Yeah, just like how restaurants can pay their waitresses minimum wage. Yeah, they totally could, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, they do here in Australia. Um, but yeah, like
Oh,
I've
yeah.
always
I
found
forget
it.
that that's a.
Yeah, I've always found it odd how, you know, service workers don't get paid, you know, there, that they have to rely on tips to survive. That's a foreign concept here in Australia. And
And
one time I
it
put up
really
a
should be
video.
because
Yeah, one
that
time
is a.
yeah. But one time I put up like a parody video where we like, you know, played a prank on a pizza delivery guy, and the biggest comment that people had was like, "Oh my God, you didn't tip him. How weird is that?" And you know, it's because tipping isn't a norm in Australia. It's like people get paid enough, so you know we don't have to tip. And another thing that happened is that we had a police strike because pizza delivery drivers were getting paid more than police. So we actually had a police strike because they were angry that, you know, these lowly pizza delivery drivers were getting paid more than them, and the, you know, much more essential service that they provide.
Yeah, well, there's a precedent for that here as well because there was a story about how someone was trying to call the police in Florida because there was a hurricane that was happening, and they were trying to get in touch with their grandmother who had lost power and their phone wasn't working. And they were like, the emergency services were like, "Yo, dude, we got our hands full." So what he did was he went online and he went to Domino's and ordered a pizza for his grandmother at her address with the instructions that they give her this particular phone number to call. And the delivery driver had his cell phone. The delivery driver gets there, gives her pizza, and then uses his cell phone, and she's just like, "Here, call this phone number." And she calls his grandson, or her grandson, and he was able to find out that his grandmother was okay in 30 minutes or less.
Yeah.
Because, and that's just the example how that works. But one of the things I like about the way the current economy is happening, at least in the United States, is there's this really big labor capitulation where people have realized that for like the last 40 years they've
They've
just
been
been
exploited.
grossly under. Yeah,
Yeah.
for like
Being
they've just been
exploited by the
grossly underpaid.
capitalists.
This is not an anti-capitalism thing because I don't think that capitalism versus communism is any better than the other way around, because any economic system you're going to have that's made or run by humans is you're gonna have people who are gonna find a way to exploit it. It's like any system. So that's don't get that vibe right now.
Yeah.
But the point is that the bottom line is I think that everybody should get a living wage.
Oh
And
yeah,
that's
definitely.
different, and that is a different number based on where you live, and that's just a fact. So like when you had people in like New York who were saying like, "Hey, we work at McDonald's and we flip burgers, but we need $15 an hour," like I immediately bristled because I remember starting my first job making $6 and a quarter working at a convenience store. I'm like, "Oh, like you're demanding $15 an hour, like goddamn, like." But
Well, I
you know,
mean,
you have to
inflation
realize,
has gone up that much. I reckon it'd be
yes,
about the same amount as what you were getting
it's
back then.
well, it's not even just that. It's the fact that like I grew up in the suburbs and they're like talking about like McDonald's in downtown Manhattan where the cost of living is much higher. And so like having that as a minimum wage is a big difference because that money does not nearly go as far as terms of paying for rent, paying for necessities like groceries or their utilities and whatnot. Um, the the point is that this labor capitulation that's happening now is that all these people are kind of realizing like, hey, if you don't want to pay us a fair wage, we're not going to do the job. And this whole thing with quiet quitting, people like literally only doing the bare minimum of what their job requires is a reflection of what they were being paid. And honestly, this really all should have happened back in like the early 90s, late 80s.
Yeah, people should have a stake in the company that they work for.
Not necessarily that, but like people should like people need a reason to do what they're doing so they don't get burned out. Because the problem was before, it's like, oh, you have to have a job, because if you don't have a job, you're going to go broke, and then you're going to be homeless, living on a box on the street.
And health, in America, as far as I know, healthcare is very much connected to your employment.
Yes, so that's the other half of it too. And I've seen a lot of stories where like like an employer will say, hey, you need to work on the weekend. And it's like, no, I'm not working on the weekend. Like, if you don't work on the weekend, you're going to be fired. Do you really want to risk your health care over this?
Yeah, exactly.
And they leverage that as a threat, which I'm not trying to get all political here, but like the healthcare system in the United States is quite literally highway robbery, where it's like, hey, you have to pay this money or else you're not going to get the surgery. So it comes down to your money or your life.
Yeah, like you see that recent Mr. Beast video where he like cured the blindness of like thousands of people, and I think that was a bit of a commentary on how, for people to get the same surgery from the US healthcare system, it would cost like $1,000 for each of them. But he can go and do it for like $10 a person, because that's how much it actually costs to fix, blindness problems, compared to what the, insurance companies and, the capitalist exploiters actually charge, in the private healthcare system.
I'm not sure what you're talking about. Like, I don't follow Mr. Beast, but I assume you're talking about cataract surgery, which again, yes, does get corrected by lasers, which costs a few pennies of electricity, but like you have to have a skilled technician to run that sort of stuff. There's the problem is though, like, I mean, this is definitely the problem. This is definitely something that I have experienced traveling internationally. Is like, yes, you can go to other countries and yes, you can get that healthcare for free, but like you're always going to have a complaint somewhere, because in the United States, yes,
Highway robbery.
All right, so here's the basic business problem you have to run into. Okay, it's a Venn diagram. Okay, of 3 circles. You can get it done good, fast, or cheap, and you can only pick 2. Now, in the United States, it's like, yes, you can get good healthcare and you can get it fast, but it ain't going to be cheap. You can go to the UK and you can get healthcare, but it ain't going to be fast, because you could have a problem and it's going to take like 6 months to get seen, and it still ain't going to be cheap, because one of the big differences that people like to ignore when they make these arguments is the fact that like your federal income tax in the United States is somewhere in the neighborhood of like 15%, whereas like when you're in Europe, it's closer to like 80%. A lot of your money in European countries goes toward tax income, and that can be good when you're talking about the massive wealth inequality, where you take like 80% of a rich person's paycheck and you can distribute that to the poor for these sort of important social services like the roads and healthcare and education.
And I don't think the CEOs need those billion-dollar bonuses either.
Right, but here's the problem, okay?
They don't need a second island for each of their children.
Look, I know it's really easy for you to make these jokes, okay, but unfortunately, it doesn't work that way, because even though you have an 80% tax rate in Europe, where you have, the idea is that you take these people who are making $1 billion and you take 80% of that and you redistribute that to the poor with services like roads, education, and healthcare. It doesn't work that way, because, like, you have this option of saying, all right, well, instead of giving it to, instead of paying taxes, I'm going to donate it to charity, which is an option. So that way, as long as you can take that money and you can donate to a charity, you can make a charitable donation, then you don't have to pay that into as taxes, which is what they do. It just so happens that they happen to own the charity that they're donating to. So they literally take it out of one pocket and they put it into the other. And that's the big problem. Okay, because when you go to these European countries where they have the higher tax rates, where it's supposed to work like that, where you're supposed to redistribute the high income taxes to the people who need it, it doesn't work because they have the means of dodging that. And so now you have the working class paying 80% of their taxes, and they're struggling for it. And this is the same problem in the United States. Even though there's lower tax rates and the rich get tax breaks, you know, the idea of it is that, oh, if you make more money, you pay more money. Well, this is the same thing where they can donate it and it just goes right back into their own pockets. And that's a huge problem that needs to get corrected. But
it doesn't look like you know, America's going to get anywhere with how it keeps electing celebrities into office rather than actual scientists or people with economic expertise.
But here's the thing, and this is not a uniquely American problem. There's
heaps of political corruption in Australia too. Like I don't know if you've ever heard of Friendly Geordies, who recently they recently attempted to assassinate. He was like a YouTuber political commentator. Yeah, you probably.
So, like I said, this is not a uniquely American problem, but the thing with politics is that the people who are smart enough to run the world correctly are smart enough to not run for political office, because running for political office is a really not smart thing to do.
And that would also probably get corrupted, you know, by the
system.
No,
it's not just that, but like if you look at anyone who gets elected into office, right off the bat, their life is on display, and no matter what they do, they're going to piss off at least half the people that elected them. Because I'm just saying, in the United States, you've got the Democrats and the Republicans. If you have someone who runs as a Democrat and let's say they get elected, automatically half the country hates you right off the bat, even though they have no idea who you were 6 months ago. You ran for office, now you're elected, automatically half the country hates you, and that was not a problem you had 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And you can try to do your best, and you can maybe make some good changes, but no matter what you do, half the country is just automatically going to hate you. And that's exactly what the 1%ers want, because they want the common people to all be fighting with each other over who's in office, and oh, this celebrity, and oh, that politician,
or fighting with each other over, you know, gayness and trans people, or really, you know, racism.
And really, none of that has any effect on the rich, because they're literally up on Mount Olympus looking down at the peasants all arguing over fighting. Like this king or that king.
Yeah, and stuff.
Now, so what's the solution to this? Because I'm not really the sort of person who will just complain about something without offering up a solution. Because for the French in the 1817 and 1800s, they had the French Revolution, where they literally dragged the bourgeoisie out into the streets and cut their heads off.
Didn't China do something like that recently?
I don't know. I mean, China has done some crazy shit, so I'm not saying that they're above that sort of thing. But the point is that there was a big
uprising against landlords in China recently. But I don't know much about it. I just saw a headline somewhere. So
yeah, I really try to avoid watching the news. It really just makes me a happier person.
Yeah, same here. Like I avoid it, but it so often gets shoved in my face anyway. So I often just read headlines and I'm like, I find
that it's more fruitful to learn history and try to learn from it, which, you know, obviously the current state of affairs would be very happy to ignore, because with the French Revolution, they literally took the 1%ers, dragged them onto the street and cut their heads off. And it honestly changed very little, because all it did was just move some lines around on a graph about who the 1% were. If you kill all the rich, then if you kill all the 1%ers, then suddenly the 2%ers become the 1%ers. That's just what happens. Like you just move that bar down a little bit. And it's the same thing with like donating to charities and try to raise up the poor, where it's like, hey, let's just let's have some soup kitchens and boots and whatnot. And like, okay, like you might be able to help some things in the local level, but that distribution curve is always going to exist where you're going to have the super rich and you're going to have the impoverished. And like that stratification is always going to exist. And you can try to raise the poor up and try to tear the rich down, but it just all it does is it moves the margins a bit.
Well,
the problem now
anyway,
is
sorry, I'll just let you give you a few more minutes, but then we should probably
All
move
right,
back
so-
to games for a little bit.
Yeah. Oh wow, we really got off track here.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is that in the modern world, if you were to start trying to have a socialist revolution in a country like the United States now, then the rich people would just leave. Like they would just go to their private islands and to watch the fires from their satellite
Maybe
televisions.
that'd be a good thing. Yeah.
No, because here's the thing. Like when the rich people leave, they take their wealth, they take their property, and they take their technology and business with them. This is what happened with Venezuela. When Venezuela collapsed, the rich people left, and the whole country collapsed on itself, and it became awful. Like I'm gonna save you a whole bunch of time now. I'm gonna tell you, just go look at what happened with Venezuela, and that is what a communist revolution looks like. It's not pretty.
Well, I kind of think it depends on how rich the country is in general. Like a poor countries have tried to do socialism and they failed, but that's because they don't have enough wealth to go around to everyone. But richer countries like America, I think, could do it. But then again, maybe not if you say the rich would just leave.
No, I'm not trying to just say no, you're wrong, but like that is not a good metric because Venezuela used to be quite wealthy as a country. They were one of the biggest producers of crude oil in the world. And all those oil barons were the ones that were like, hey, we've got these oil rigs, these offshore rigs. We're drilling for oil. We're welling it. We're refining it with these refineries that we have. And when all this stuff started to happen, all these people were like, the majority of the country was like, hey, we're working for these oil companies. And then they started having this revolution, and then all the oil, the people who were owning the companies were like, all right, well, we're out of here. So all of a sudden, like 90% of the country was like out of a job because all these refineries are just like, nope, shut down.
Yeah.
Even though the country was rich, the people who owned it left, and they took their wealth, they took their technology, and the stuff and honestly, the key components, because they're not just going to leave this to the hands of the workers. They just keep on producing oil and have their own economy. Like they took this stuff with them, so they physically could not do that, and they had the means of doing it. Like the whole
Eventually
idea,
they're going to try to escape to space. That's what Elon and all them are trying to work on now.
Man, if you want to shift gears, let me tell you, space is not fun. Like being in low Earth orbit is not fun. It is a pain. Living on the space station is a pain for a variety of physical reasons, just because there's no gravity.
Yeah, it's probably going to eventually be necessary when they destroy the Earth and strip it of all its resources.
No, it's not going to come to that. Trying to you have to understand, like, look at the way that they colonize the United States and think about that as not the United States. When they colonize the New World, you have to kind of compare that to like colonizing Mars, where like hopefully Mars doesn't have a bunch of but barring that, it's essentially the same process where you have to send these rugged individuals who start out with essentially nothing, have to make the most of what they can with what they have when they get there. That's what Mars is going to be. They're going to send a few people to get there and try to set up a colony, send some resources along with them to try to get things established. But man, it is going to be tough as balls because Mars is not a very habitable planet. And
it's going to take probably 100 years to terraform it if they try to do that anyway.
it's going to take several thousand years to terraform a planet. Like, let me be abundantly clear about that. And in the meantime, Earth is still going to be here. And you know what? Climate change is going to happen. Some places are going to turn to deserts. Some places are going to turn to rainforests. The ice caps are going to melt. The oceans are going to rise. And all that's just going to happen. But like, it's still going to be the most habitable planet in the solar system. That's like Mars is never going to be better than Earth. Like ever. Until the Earth gets absorbed by the sun in 5 billion years, Mars is not going to be better than Earth. That's just the bottom line. I mean, I could be wrong. 2,000 years from now, we might have the technology to become a Type 1 civilization.
That might be a good opportunity to move on to the next topic of Rimworld. Have you been playing that much?
I have not, but it looks like
that's
something I could totally. Yeah, like it looks like a more approachable version of Dwarf Fortress, which is on my wish list.
Yeah, that's pretty much exactly what it is. Although I play it with like a crap load of mods. Like I got the recent expansion. There's like 3 expansions now, but I actually tried to play it with the newest expansion, and I found it's the base vanilla game such a huge downgrade from playing the hardcore SK mod set that I just ended up playing it without the expansion and playing another game with the hardcore SK mods because it's kind of that problem where you play a game with like hundreds of mods and then you go back to vanilla and it feels like a really boring game in comparison. So yeah.
Yeah, I had that experience when No Man's Sky first came out. I don't want to say when it first came out. I didn't play it when it first came out, but when its first major DLC came out with the base building aspects.
Wow, I used to not even have that.
Yeah. The ratings were so in the toilet that it was on a deep sale at the time, and I said, "All right, well, for $5, who can go wrong, right?" So I played it, and I messed around with I did some modding of my own to try to make it more playable because I said like, okay, what is the heart of this game? Like that's what I was trying to get at, and it's like, okay, so there's some survival aspects. So let's say I spend all this time. I didn't have time to do all this grinding, but let's say we have all this time to do this grinding. I get all these materials together to make these ship parts. So I hacked the materials in, and I said, okay, I got the ship together. Cool. Now what? Now I'm traveling, and it's like, oh, hey, there's this whole thing with the black holes there, the dark matter places. Gosh, forever.
It looks like a really deep game, but I've only gotten about like 5 hours deep into it, and then I've like played something else. But it looks like it'd be a very interesting game to get deep into. It would just take a bit of dedication to get there.
Yeah. So a lot of it feels like that the materials collection aspect is a lot of game padding, which it is. And so I said, all right, well, let me eliminate that. And then I was trying to pursue the story with essentially infinite resources and infinite money because there's a lot of stuff you have to buy when you go to like what?
I said cheetah.
Because I tried playing it as it was presented to me. I said, and I recognized immediately, like, oh, I gotta find all this iron ore to try to craft these things. And as soon as you step out of your ship, it doesn't matter what planet you're on. There's no safe planet. As soon as you step out of your ship, you immediately start dying. Like you have something, whether it's heat or cold or radiation or toxicity or something that starts depleting the amount of time you can be on your planet before you have to go back to your ship, which limits your radius of how far you can explore. And I'm like, well, I'm really tired of this game fucking telling me where I can't go. So, these were aspects so I changed it. So I said like, all right, if I could make this game better, what would I do? Well, I would eliminate that. So I did. And so like, all right, now, and I'm earning money to buy these things. So how do I do that? Oh, I got to sell this crap. All right, well, I'm not spending 300 hours taking pictures of animals to try to earn 10 credits a piece to get however much money I need for this upgrade. So let's assume I've done all that. And my conclusion from doing all that, once I, had because I knew what the moment-to-moment gameplay was in terms of like collecting iron and digging and finding these things to make these upgrades for these parts for these ships to be able to go to a different planet, to be able to go to a different star system, to go to the center of the galaxy and whatnot, was that like 99% of it was just grinding resources. And the last 1% of it, I actually really enjoyed. Where once I eliminated all that, where I could just be like, all right, I've got fuel, I've got the parts, I can just go from place to place and just explore.
Yeah.
The part that I really liked about it was like discovering new alien words and learning these languages. And like there's this whole hidden game to it that gets buried under all this grind where you could, if they just eliminated the need for resources and money and whatnot, and you're literally just in a ship hopping from planet to planet, going to these monoliths, you become like this archaeologist trying to find like the Rosetta Stone for these alien languages because you run into these other races where you don't understand their words, but every once in a while a word will pop out because you've discovered that word was. So you have to kind of intuit what they're saying and communicate back. And it becomes this really great language sub game that I thoroughly enjoyed, and I've never seen any other game do that before or since.
Okay.
And unfortunately, it's buried in this, really padded, a mile wide, an inch deep game of, and presumably infinite
I guess
travel.
it sometimes depends on like what you're looking for. Like sometimes you just want to play a game, and you just want to be interacting, and other times you want to have a like story like experience.
Yeah, and like for like resource mining and so that sort of survival style game, like Minecraft did that way back in the early 2000s, and everything I've seen since then has been some recoloring of that basic like collecting resources to craft this to craft that.
Yeah.
And these sort of like tech
If you
trees.
put enough mods on Minecraft, you can make it even bigger than No Man's Sky.
Yeah.
Which I've
Well,
done a few times.
Well, yeah, in terms of just like the sheer amount of like square area that you can traverse, if you add up all the planets in No Man's Sky versus
And also progression systems. Like I've put like enough mods on Minecraft before that it takes like 500 hours just to reach the diamond armor tier, and then there's like still 50 tiers of armor after that.
Yeah. See, like now that I don't need. See, like
or there's this one time when I had mods on Civilization 4 that extended the game and increased the tech tree to the point that it would like take 10 constant days just to reach the industrial age.
Yeah.
It really depends if you want to add that much padding to your game, I guess.
Yeah, and look at there are some people who are living at home who are unemployed in their parents' basement,
Like
and they
I
literally
used to be for the most part.
And they have all the time in the world for that sort of stuff. But
Yeah, I miss those times.
well, there's a price to pay for everything because, like, when you're living in somebody else's house and you're living under their rules, then it's you're trading comfort and convenience for freedom, and so to be free, obviously that comes at a cost too because you have to pay for where you're living and all the things that you want to do, you have to pay for somehow, like money.
Getting to be naked in your own home too.
Well, I mean, you could be naked. You could be naked in your mom's home too, but it's going to lead to an awkward conversation.
Yeah.
But the point is, like, you pay for it one way or another. Either you have to live under somebody else's rules and do chores, or you're paying for it yourself. In which case, you have to spend, all this time every day, at a job doing work, and they're compensating you for your time because it's obviously not something that you would choose to do. Otherwise, it wouldn't be work; it would be a hobby. That's just the economy of time, and I think that the movie In Time with Justin Timberlake and Olivia Wilde there
I think I might have seen that. It's like
What?
a romance movie, isn't it?
No, I mean, sort of. Like the romance is definitely a B story to it. It's really a fantastic take on the reality of being a one percenter, or not being a one percenter, but like the reality of the one percenters. It's not about having money; it's about what you can buy with money. Because, like, and I'm not trying to take this back to a political place. I'm just saying that In Time was a great movie, and I recommend it.
I remember Notch used to complain a lot about how, like, even though he's like rich and everything, he can't ever know if someone that he meets actually likes him. Can be sort of a problem with, you know, being one of the 1%. You know, you got all the
Well,
money in the world, but you're lonely.
all right, so that's two things. So if you're rich and or famous, then yes, you can never really know if someone likes you because of you or because of you being rich or famous, which is a big problem with being rich or famous.
Yeah.
Um, the other aspect of that is the a more biological component, which is the hedonic treadmill, where no matter what, no matter how good or bad your life is, your brain will chemically find a median place in it, where like even though you had like the Jews who were in concentration camps, at some point they were able to be like, well, it can't get any worse, and they just kind of enjoyed the day to day, whatever they could, whether it was a bowl of soup or like a pair of shoes from someone else who died, and that just happens to fit them, and that was the highlight of their whole entire month because hey, look, I've got shoes that don't have holes in them, and they were able to find some slice of joy in that
Yeah. One
because
thing I think about quite a lot is how, like, we in this modern age are used to all these luxuries of like internet and being able to constantly have entertainment on in the background when we're doing whatever. Compared to, like, you know, back in the Stone Age when people would have to tell each other stories to entertain themselves, or, you know, play little
well,
games with
it's
sticks.
yeah, well, that's the other thing too. Like if you look at the other end,
But
like
now,
I
like, if I
think,
were to lose all that, if I were to lose internet, I'd probably be so, like, I can't imagine how bored I'd be.
well, you see, that's the thing. You can't imagine it, but I can because I know what life without the internet was like. And I can tell you right now confidently that unless you've got some other really serious underlying conditions, you would be fine.
Hmm.
You would eventually be
Well,
fine
I
because
did have a
there.
similar experience. I was actually homeless in the Australian outback for 5 months. Um, although my mum did take my little notebook to her work, and I was able to get like 3 or 4 hours of computer time a day. But, you know, other than that, pretty much the only thing I was doing was reading novels. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of my little bit of experience with not having as much technology.
So the show Futurama does a really good job of
Oh yeah, I
talking
love
about
that
this.
show.
It's actually an anti-humanism show because it takes place in the year 3000, as far as like the people who were animating it in the 90s could imagine what the year 3000 was, which included box TVs still, because the flat screen TV was just such a alien concept they couldn't even fathom it. Um, I think that's hilarious. That's a Flintstoning effect, by the way, which is
Yeah,
another thing you can look
Simpsons
up.
does that a lot as well. Like,
Yeah,
Simpsons even predicted Trump becoming president,
yeah.
along
Well,
with a
no,
lot of
that's
other
I,
things.
I don't mean that. I mean like how if you watch the Simpsons, not the Simpsons, the Flintstones, you have um you have Wilma Flintstone vacuuming her rug with an elephant, and it's like
Yeah.
the Stone Age people would have no concept of how a vacuum cleaner would work, but they make this Stone Age version of a modern device. And the same thing works in the other direction, where you have the year 3000 with Futurama, and they still have box TVs from the 90s
Yeah.
because it's a product of when it was made.
And I think
But the point is,
In Star Trek, they have video calls before video calls were even possible.
right, but that's not the same concept. I'm talking about how, like, when you have the actual future, like now, where we've got flat screen TVs. If you look at a show like Futurama, they should have flat screen TVs or something even more futuristic, but they still had box TVs because that's
Mm.
what the TVs looked like in the 90s when the show was made.
Yeah.
Um, as a, so I got distracted here. But the point of Futurama, is that it demonstrates how even in the year 3000, even though when Fry first gets to the year 3000, his mind is blown. Everything is just amazing. Everything's incredible. And
Well, one thing to say
everybody,
is we're not going to evolve very much biologically in 1,000 years. We're still going to be very much the same and have the same, pretty much the same brain as we do now.
more or
So,
less.
yeah.
But the point is, in the year 3000, Fry gets there. Everything is amazing and nobody is happy because it's all the same basic human. And I realize it's robots and mutants and aliens and all that stuff, but it's all the same basic the
All the
human
same
experience
desires,
problems. Yeah, because you and that's why you have so many people who are disgustingly rich and yet they're miserable because
Well, they claim
the
to be
problem
miserable.
look, I'm sure they really are, and like we can't have if we're not rich, we
Well,
can't have any sympathy for them
Well,
because like, oh well, if I was rich.
one thing I do think is I think that Elon Musk is extremely unhappy and very what's the word, insecure about himself and how he's perceived. Even though he's like the richest man in the world, a lot of people dislike him, and I think he's a bit embarrassed about that, like in his personal feelings about himself.
That's probably true. I don't really follow him, but like that's probably true. But here's the thing. All right, like I could say to you, like, okay, do you think your life is perfectly happy right now? And you could easily say no, and I could say why. Well, for this, that, and the other reason. All right. Well, what's the solution to that? And the funny expression is like I've got 99 problems, and money could solve all of them. And for people like you and I, that's true. Like I've got bills I got to pay. I got places I want to visit, and I've got things I want to own. And if you had $1 billion, the things that you and I could imagine, we could solve all those things. Like I could have my dream house. I could visit every place I've ever wanted to go to. I could own everything I've ever wanted to own, aside from like maybe owning a small country. And I could do all the experiences I've ever wanted to do. Now you do all that in a year. It's the highlight of your entire life, of anyone's life, right? You've lived like a king. You've won the lottery. You've done everything, and then all that's over, and then you've still got the rest of your life to live. And it's like, well, what do I do now?
Yeah. Well, one thing I think would probably happen if I ever, became rich is I might start, overindulging on alcohol and other drugs because, like once I've enjoyed the money for a bit, I'm worried I would, succumb to my addictions and stuff.
And that's what it comes down to.
Like
And that's
if
not
I had
just for
unlimited
you.
money, often the only thing that stops me, from, binging on stuff that's unhealthy for me is the fact that I run out of money and I'm forced to cold turkey.
And that is the same for anybody. And I'm not just saying like not just you because you have an addictive personality or anything like that, but it comes down to it's a chemical warfare in your brain. You do these things that make you happy to make the happy dopamine in your brain. And the threshold for that gets higher and higher and higher as you have more money. So now it's like, hey, in order for me to be happy, I need to go for a trip to Paris. In order for me to be
I need to
happy in
go
Paris,
for a trip to the moon.
yeah,
You know,
no,
like
and that's the thing.
what's his name?
But
Jeff
listen,
Bezos.
but the point is there's no upper limit to that threshold. Okay, and you're always going to end up averaging out somewhere in the middle where you don't feel euphoric all the time, but you're not miserable all the time either. You're just kind of awake, And the problem that people expect is that when they become rich or famous and they have all this fame, is that I will be happy all the time. And that's just not something that the human brain is designed to do. And so what happens is you become a billionaire, or no, like let's say you become like if you're the sort of person who's spent most of your life being poor, you think like, oh, if I just had some money, then I'd be happy. Oh, if I just had a better house, I'd be happy. If I had a better car, I'd be happy. If I had a better whatever, I'd be happy. And you get so ingrained in equating your happiness with wealth that these people who like win the lottery, for example, or some other way have some windfall where they become rich. They think they become happy for a little while, but then what ends up happening is all those old problems come back. Well, not necessarily that those old problems come back, but the things that made them happy don't last forever. And now they're like, okay, I'm miserable again, but I'm also rich. Now what do I do? Because I don't know how to fix this. And so it's very, very possible to be a billionaire and be miserable. And there's no way that poor people can relate to that.
Yeah, and
It's
that rich people can even have more money to spend on, psychiatrists and stuff. But
but so fortunately, one of the things that you can do is that you can help people who are less fortunate than you, and that does make you feel good. That is a human thing where you see a homeless person, you give them $1, or you give them a hamburger or whatever, and you see how happy that makes them, and that makes you happy. And there is also no limit to that either. And
Yeah.
so you will have some rich people who are doing genuine good. Like you have um,
Do you ever think that there's like rich people that are genuine psychopaths that like can't have empathy for other people?
oh, I'm sure there's
Yeah.
psychopaths at
I
every
think a
level of
lot of those
society.
people, usually end up being the CEOs and stuff because they have to be able to know that they are screwing like, hundreds of thousands of people to lives of poverty while they're complaining
Like
about, their first world problems.
I get that you're not wealthy, but are you aware of your own biases?
Probably. Like I do have quite a big hatred for the rich, you know.
Yeah, I mean, like you're not subtle about that, and like yes, obviously
Probably
I have
because
my
I
own.
have, been spent most of my life in close to poverty, but like Australian poverty, which is like higher than American poverty, I guess. So it's been kind of in between. Yeah, I'm not sure how to describe it, but
All
anyway,
right, all right. Like I I think there's a pretty standard distribution curve at all levels in terms of personalities. I mean, obviously, you're going to have more type A personalities be the people who are succeeding more in the top there. But like in terms of like psychopathy or sociopathy, um, I think there's a pretty standard distribution curve where you're going to have those ones who are going to succeed versus the ones who are going to stay poor and just be living in a trailer park and killing drifters and whatnot versus the ones who can put those impulses aside and apply that to being a savvy business person and or a heartless lawyer or whatever. uh, there's a lot of anthropological basis for the necessity of sociopaths as an evolutionary usefulness. Um, like we're talking like 20,000 years ago in the tribal sense, where if you had to go to war with a neighboring tribe, you would want to have 1% of your population be a sociopath because you want to send them out there to kill other tribes people and not come back all messed up because you need them to be a functioning warrior. So you need that percentage of population to exist. And that's one of the genealogical anthropological bases for why psychopathy exists. If that also makes them a really good defense lawyer, then whatever, they found a niche in a modern society where you know nature could not have foreseen the need for a defense lawyer back when we were hunters and gatherers.
yeah,
It's really easy to point your fingers and say like, oh well, the rich must all either be evil or crazy or whatever. But like, there are good and bad people at all levels of society. I have met some super rich people who are also really genuinely super good, and they demonstrate that. Like it's not just at a particular charity event where they have to put on a good face. It's like no, like they go their whole lives being good, and you can have plenty of poor people who are
yeah. I probably
incredibly
need to see
evil.
more news about those people because I tend to only hear about the rich people that are doing evil stuff, I guess.
And I think that comes down to like the effect of the global internet and the effect of the echo chamber. Because the thing with your curtailed news feed is that like if you see a particular story and you like it, the algorithm will feed you more of those stories. So if you want to see more stories about rich people being, if you like a story about rich people being evil, you're going to get more stories about rich people being evil. And unfortunately, this has a lot of political implications too, because the reason why there's so much division in politics, at least in the United States, is because you have you've got the right and the left all keeping to themselves, all chanting like, "Hey, look how look how correct we are,
living
and
in
how
their echo
bad the other side
chamber,
is."
living in their
Yeah,
echo
but
chamber and YouTube algorithm that's
but
tailored to them.
that's unfortunately that's everywhere. That's a global phenomenon, and that's with political parties in any country where our party is the best, and anyone else who disagrees with us has to be wrong or evil or whatever. And it just leads to this division because unfortunately, with network television, it used to be the case that everyone was seeing the same show.
Yeah.
Everyone was exposed to this.
Sorry, just quickly. One thing I did find interesting is that I spent some time on YouTube with the algorithm off, like logged out of YouTube, and it showed me a bunch of Mr. Beast and Family Guy episodes. It's what it was what seems to be the blank slate for people to watch when they have no algorithm.
Well, it shows you what's most popular. So even then, it's a skewed result.
Yeah.
You're not just getting literally the most random stuff. It's like, hey, a lot of people watch YouTube and Mr. Beast videos. Like enough people where if you're a new person, like, hey, here's what most people like. So keep on being part of the majority. And it becomes the case of the emperor has no clothes.
What other sort of TV shows have you watched? Recommend? Like recently, I've been watching The Great. It's a sort of comedy slash kind of historically accurate account of Catherine the Great.
Okay.
Of Russia. I think it's set in the 18 or 1700s, and it's a really good show. Like just great acting, all that sort of stuff, and it goes into a lot of political stuff about Catherine the Great being this person that believes in science and progressivism and stuff, and she basically overtakes the current leader of Russia, who's like all about war and just partying and not giving a crap about and sort of like it's a society where there's serfs and nobles and that sort of stuff, and Catherine the Great comes in and wants to change all that and make it so that like get rid of like put everyone on an equal level as the nobles. But she ends up finding that very hard. Like this second season is about how hard she's finding her actual ideals are to implement. In reality, when she actually has power and control, she's realizing that a lot of the time the people are very resistant, especially the higher class nobles who have had these serfs do things for them. Are suddenly shocked and against her leadership.
Yeah, I mean it's very hard to get people who have power to give up power.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine, like one of the funny things about I really hate to take this back to a political place, but like the
Well, I
the
should
United
probably call
States.
this the political podcast. I mean, I probably could, if that's
Well, I mean,
what you
like
like talking about. But
it's what you like talking about, and I do have commentation on it, but
yeah,
like
it's what I like
like
to talk
they will.
about. But as you know, like I'm not allowed to talk about it on the Discord that we both frequent. So I
Yeah.
do take it
So
other places sometimes.
it's look at if this is what you want your podcast to be, like if you have a government that
It's not
determines its
necessarily
own
what I want
pay,
my YouTube channel to be. That's the problem.
that's fine. We're working out the growing pains. But like if you have a government that determines its own paycheck, then it's gonna keep on giving itself raises, which is what happens. And if you have the people who have money lobbying to tell you like, hey, push this policy or don't push that policy, then that's what's gonna happen. And all these policies that end up benefiting the rich who have the means to push them to lobby for them, that's what's going to happen. And that's not a uniquely American
Oh yeah.
issue. That happens anywhere because
I think just about every first world country is like is run by the corporations. It's, the corporations that control the government by like bribing the officials. And it's not really technically a democracy where the normal people actually get to dictate what goes on.
yeah, and with any form of government, there's always any government that's any system. I'm not even gonna say government, but any system, any company, any organization, any government, whatever. As long as it's run by humans, it has the capacity to be corrupted, and that's unfortunately that's just the reality of being a human with free will. Is that all we can do, all we can hope for is just the best we can with what we have. And honestly, like I could complain all day about all these individual problems I don't like about the modern world, about how everyone's all staring at their phones or sitting home playing video games instead of like being out in the streets and riding bikes and playing tag or capture the flag or whatever, playing with friends, outside. It's honestly, if this wasn't
I
the
think the
best
problem is
situation,
more that people are too productive and need to spend more time sitting and playing video games because
well,
I think society is in this sort of delusion where it has to be productive no matter what, and it always has to be more productive, and we need to consume more resources and we need to make more things, rather than actually just chilling a bit and living life.
right. Well, we're the current world is sitting in a lap of convenience and luxury that's built on the backs of a lot of people who do not have it. And I don't want you to count yourself among the people whose backs upon this is which, because you are literally on the internet right now talking to somebody a world away on a computer that you did not build, that like was built in another country in a sweatshop by some people who are going to go home to live in a fucking dumpster.
It's pretty much impossible to consume ethically, like, and unless you're completely off the grid.
Yeah, and that's just it. Like at a certain point, you have to, if you're gonna go on Twitter and complain about environmentalism, like you need to recognize that you are doing that from a phone that was built in a factory that uses dirty fuel to power it in China. Like
I'm sure people are aware of that. I don't think it's necessarily productive to say, oh, well, yeah, if you're using those things to try to make a point, then you shouldn't be making the point at all. I think that just ends up silencing
oh
people.
yeah, no, I get that. That I understand what you mean. That's a pedantic argument.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like things are better now than they have ever been. Like all these problems now about like wealth disparity, it's like, yes, we're more aware of them because this is the information age and we know about it. In the same way that we know that lightning is a result of like
but hasn't there been like a massive increase in like there's been a disappearance of the middle class just since the 90s and 80s? Like, isn't that a really noticeable change just in the last 2 decades when
Yes, there is. But like we're not but like here's the thing, like there also was not a middle class in Egypt because you had the pharaohs and then you had the commoners, and like that was a 0 to 100% difference of distribution of wealth, where one person literally owned everything and nobody else owned anything. And that's a very extreme example to pull from, but like even the lower class in the United States, like if you have a job, you have healthcare. Like if you get a splinter, you're not going to die from a bacterial infection. Like even though you have this incredible wealth disparity and you have this incredible poor, like where there's no quote unquote middle class, and you have all these people who, are working these dead end jobs or have all this student debt from going to university.
student debt
you don't
is
have
bloody horrible.
Yeah, like you're not gonna die from cholera because you drank from the wrong well. You know, like there's a lot to appreciate about the modern world, even though like we have our modern problems. Like people are just you don't have to worry about dying in childbirth. You don't have to worry about
Yeah,
dying as a baby. You're not going to get
I
eaten
think
by a
one thing that
dingo.
I've noticed is that people seem to be, complaining about more pointless, pedantic things like trans people, um, because we're like so well off in general. People need an enemy when things are relatively
That's all
peaceful.
right. Kind of a hot button example, but yeah, people are always going to need to find something to complain about, and like back in back during the civil rights movement, there was this whole disparity between people of different races, and then it became the disparity against people about different sexual orientations, and then it became about identity because people just want to make fun of people who are different than them. Like I grew up in the suburbs. I went to a high school
Oh yeah,
of
I was
six
picked
hundred.
on a lot at school for being autistic.
Well, like okay, so like autism was really not even a thing when I went to high school. Like you were just kind of like slow. You were in the Todd squad, you know. But like we didn't even really have that either. Like that was all in a special classroom that was kind of like it was kind of invisible. But the point I was going to say was that like I was in a high school of 600 students, and I think there was maybe three black students because we were in, like I said, we were in the suburbs. So it was a very white community. There was very few minorities, but there was still plenty of things that people would find to make fun of each other about. Okay, and I'm not talking about like autistic stuff. I'm talking about like if you had the wrong kind of jeans or the wrong brand of
Or
jacket or
if you held your glass the wrong way, you're gay.
uh, really.
Oh yeah, yeah. I don't know. At my school, that happened a lot. Like if you had your pinky off the glass, or all kinds of things like that. Like being called gay was a
Okay.
very common insult. Just a general insult.
See, the funny thing is, like, I mean, you and I are aware of this stuff now, but like when I was in middle school and we would throw that word around, like we had no idea, at least I didn't. I had no idea that two gentlemen could do that sort of thing together. Like I didn't know what being a homosexual actually was. Like I just knew that gay was a derogatory term in a very general sense, like oh man, we got homework on Friday, that's gay. Like
Hmm.
had no concept of homosexuality at all. It was just a bad thing. And so like
But it
now,
actually came from a good thing. Gay used to mean happy. So
yeah. And also back in the 60s, you could say something that was cool was sad.
or sick.
Yeah. Like that's the thing. Like the fluid nature of language is a whole other discussion, but when I remember one time I was asking for a defibrillator, and I was like, "That's a made up word," and it's like, "No, they're all made up," and that's true. All words are made up. Language is fluid; it changes all the time. Like it's so funny. Like when I hear people say like, "Hey, if you come to America, speak English." It's like, okay, well, you've got plenty of people in the United States who speak English, and I can't understand exactly what they're fucking saying because of accents or
Yeah.
slang. You know, you could have everyone in the world right now all speaking the exact same language, same slang, same accent, whatever, and that'll last for like, I don't know, a year.
Yeah, well, one thing I often like to mention to people is that if I were to take a Australian citizenship test, I'd probably fail because I don't use a lot of the mannerisms and slang that my fellow Australians use. Because I guess probably because I've been exposed to so much American media and spoken to American people a lot more than I've spoken to to people in my own community. So yeah, I don't have a lot
And
of the Australian slang that that I've noticed that I've heard a lot of people say is very difficult for them to understand, and I don't even know most of them. Like people can bring up like a Australian slang term, and I'm like, I'm not even sure if I know what that means myself.
mm, anyways, hey, listen, going forward, I know this is kind of in the morning for you, but would it be easier for you to do it in the Arvo?
Possibly. It depends on when cash can come on. I'm hoping, to get both of you on, and maybe with Cash on, it'll be a bit more about video games.
Did you just like not notice how I said Arvo?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, okay. Yeah, that's a good point because I did know what you meant by Arvo. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
no,
did
I
sound
had
normal to me, but Americans
I
don't
had to
say
force
Arvo.
that.
Yeah.
No, that's not a word. That's not a word to us. We say afternoon,
Yeah.
which
But yeah, I guess I
uh,
didn't notice it. I am Australian enough that Arvo just sounded like a normal word to me.
oh. Anyways, I can't stand too much longer. I gotta take my car down to the servo.
Yep. Okay. Do you want to like promote any socials or anything?
Again, I just slid in servo there and you knew what I meant.
Sorry?
Servo.
So yeah,
Like
you're going to a
like
servo, the gas station?
gas station, yeah.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
don't say servo.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay. Yeah. So you are. That kind of proves my point. That yeah. Well, maybe doesn't prove my point. That maybe I
just
would
saying, if
pass
you
citizenship test.
I'm just saying, yes, you would pass, and if you said either of those things to somebody else, you'd have to explain what the fuck's an arvo. You
Yeah.
know, you'd have to
I
explain
don't
that. Oh,
use
what's
those
a
words much myself though, unless I
oh, no,
am.
because
And
again, because it's slang,
yeah.
and I learned a whole bunch of it for when I went to visit Australia, so that way I didn't sound like a complete tourist, or at least so I could understand what people were saying, so I didn't have to ask stupid questions like what's a servo. Because to me, a servo is an electrical component in a robot.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah.
But anyways, it is just about midnight here.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for talking to me. Um, I'm probably gonna edit some parts of this before I put it up, and
Yeah, like cut out like 90% of it because of all the political stuff.
I guess I'll see how the political stuff goes. It's just that my YouTube channel isn't political, so I feel like it would be a bit jarring for listeners to
Yeah.
suddenly have political stuff up. Although I did
So,
sorry, just one more thing. I did have an
yep.
idea to get a lot of my political opinions out in the open in a by using the excuse of doing a Let's Play of Democracy 3 while I rant about socialism. Like that's a game that I
Okay.
bought recently.
All right.
That's something I was planning on maybe doing to
Yeah.
sort
No,
of get it
I
out
guess
there.
I guess you could do that in that context. Listen, it's your podcast. You know, like if you, I'm just following wherever you lead me. You know, and
Yeah,
if you lead me into political stuff, I'm gonna have a political opinion because everybody does.
yeah,
If you want to talk about economic opinion stuff, I've got an opinion about that too. Just
yeah.
I
I think I
would
have
just
like
suggest
sorry.
I would suggest that if you want to be a gaming podcast, that we gotta have a better focus on that.
Yeah. Well, one thing though is that I think I could explain my opinion better about politics, but I don't know if I'm as confident at being as eloquent on the spot. Like I have things that I believe, but I feel like I'd kind of have to write them out and read them. But you're a lot more eloquent at getting your point out immediately.
Well, yeah, I mean, you could write it all out, but I think most people would call that a manifesto at that point.
Hmm. But yeah, well,
I just
thanks for joining me.
All right, so
Hopefully,
all right,
I can
so
have Cash
for the
next
sake
time.
of the podcast, for the sake of the podcast, let's do a nice clean outro, okay? So we just got done talking about video game stuff. So, all right, thank you for talking to me about all that cool video game stuff. Let's do the outro now.
All right, thank you for joining me, Shakes. You want to give anyone your socials or stuff?
Well, I'm on Discord, so you can find me at Shakespearicles on Discord. I think they got rid of the numbers now, didn't they? But otherwise, I'm on filmfiction.net. That's where you'll be. That's where it'll be easiest to find me.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'll probably be back here if you'll have me back on.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks for joining me. Hopefully we can have Cash next time, and maybe it'll be more about video games then. So,
All right. Looking forward to it.
all right. Catch you later, dude.